Ghana's economy is said to be showing signs of recovery according to the IMF. But how is the situation on the ground? Is this recovery really impacting on industries and manufacturing firms? And now in the midst of all these challenges, how are these industries managing? Well, some of these are the issues that we'll be trying to get some answers on PM Express Business Edition tonight as we look at the state of industries and Ghana's economic recovery. We engage in the President of the Ghana Association of the Industry, that is Dr. Humphrey Ayim-Darke, as we try and get some answers to some of these burning issues out there and how are they managing in these difficult times. Is that easy to pass on that cost to consumers or you absorb it? What about all these concerns out there? Well, these are the issues we'll be talking on PM Express Business Edition as you engage the President of AGIA, Dr. Humphrey Ayim-Darke, on the industry, state, the outlook, and whether things will be that good going forward. Be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we look at the state of industries in Ghana today and Ghana's economic recovery. Is that impacting positively on industries or not? Well, the best person to answer all these questions for me is the President of the Association of Ghana Industries, Dr. Humphrey Ayim-Darke. And he's here with me, studio. Doc, how are you doing? Some would say, you're President of AGIA, but you also owner of several businesses. And therefore, it's not just about sitting in the offices to talk about, but you also feel in the situation on the ground.
Yeah, I try to go beyond policy and try to also be useful to my family and my kindred. So if you do policy alone, engaging in AGI, and I can't find bread and butter for my family, my wife will kick me out of the house. So I got to be a multifaceted individual. So I am trying to do my best.
How are the industries doing? I mean, zooming it down even to taxes. And it'll be interesting just to quickly get your thoughts on this because the Vice President and the leader of the MPP party going into these elections has outlined several measures. One is on abolishing some taxes if he's given the mandate. As industry, I know you've made several push for the review of some of these taxes. What do you make of these proposals that he's put on the table that if he should get the mandate from the people, he's going to do these actions?
Thank you, George. It's always an exciting time to have you engage on serious discussions on the industry. Yes, we want to say that over the period of 11 years, average GDP growth of industry has been 11% over the period of 7 years. And if you drill it down further, you could want to see what the service industry has been over the period of 3 to 4 years. It's about 1.8%. If you go for agriculture, one could drill it down further to about 0.9%. And if you drill it further on manufacturing, you could see about 0.5%. It tells you that in the space or in the jurisdiction of the West African Economic Zone that we operate in, our industrial and specifically the manufacturing sector, it's underperforming. And then that which becomes a concern is the agrarian sector, which agriculture. We have arable lands that we should take advantage of and to tap into the various laudable policies like the One District, One Factory, the Planting for Food and Jobs, the off-taker arrangement of the buffer stocks and the feeding program. Because when you do the value chain analysis and you have the capacity to perfect the value chain, then you appreciate when you plant corn. And at the end of the day, it's millet that is feeding a school. So the value from the farm gate all the way to the customer then increases. There are a lot of intricacies within the middle where we have a lot of oligopolistic markets. I use the word oligopolistic because there are a lot of queen mothers and market queens that and play within the distributive chain that distorts the final price and therefore has direct effect on inflation. And if it does, the inflation basket then shoots up. That then triggers all manner of complications and it comes to the cost of doing business. And therefore, when he asks of the question, how is industry performing?
Yeah.
Within the value chain that I've described, once that exists, and then the raw material cost is pretty expensive, and the cost of financing is expensive as a result of inability of collecting of significant domestic tax, it then becomes a situation that the cost of doing business is high and the effect is on industry, and the industry becomes uncompetitive. And once we become uncompetitive, practicing a liberalized market where the extent of the liberalization allows every Tom, Dick, and Harry to just import everything into the country, therefore they muddy the waters, and the cascading effect has a significant effect on your forex. Once you have that significant effect on your forex, it triggers your policy rate, it triggers your lending rate, and brings a total confusion.
Do I get from you that you are pushing more of a protectionism? Because some will say that we are practicing an open market. So
I'm of the school of thought that for a middle developing economy or a low developing economy, you do not, and it's not even done in the US or even in China where we all appreciate what they've done, where regulation is just thrown to the dogs and there's no extent of regulation and you practice a total liberalized economy.
Is that what is happening here in Ghana?
That's what's happening in Ghana. In Ghana, hey, you can wake up and import everything you want to import. And so the extent of liberalization and then unbridled extent of free market has a total effect on manufacturing.
What do you tell those who say that you're not living up to being competitive in this environment? And that is your cry. Because if you're able to be competitive, if you compare what is happening even to some of your friends in the other regions, they are still surviving. So maybe industries still want to be protected. And the cry about opening up the market is neither here nor there.
It's never been the case that the Association of Ghana Industries or our associate and allied have stated that we want protectionism.
You champion the recent plan by government to endorse to place restrictions on imports.
Because you take the opportunity to grow and build capacity, and then you move on stage by stage.
How many years?
Let me give you
to grow.
No, so let's use examples.
60 years of independence.
So, but you know,
shouldn't be in a state right now.
But within the 60 years of independence, there have been a lot of interruptions. There has been a lot of governance-related matters. So the consistency of policy that gives you the room to grow and be robust and take advantage of that opportunity has eluded us in many ways. So since 1992 till date, thank God we have some stability, reasonable stability, to which that attracts FDIs all over the world. So once that becomes the fulcrum or the basis of your engagement, then you look out for the systems that can perfect and allow you to develop, handhold, develop. And I give an example. In the era of the oil discovery and Tallow brought oil discovery, made strong case for local content. And today, you and I can boast about a number of companies in the value addition services in between the upstream. And you can name, if I ask you how many upstream companies that are offering services for catering, for welding, for other services in terms of the helicopter services, you will name companies because they were given the opportunity and they were handheld. This is done everywhere. So we are not scared of competition. All we say is that in the formation of a country, coming from a least developing economy, where your characteristics of human capital, migration from rural to urban areas, putting stress on the infrastructure and other related ones. And then a government comes in that I seek to do free SHS. And there is massive migration from rural to urban areas and puts a lot of pressure on the school facilities. Government then looks for money to create infrastructure. You remember in the early days, there was deliberate effort to control population for purposes of growth. China did it. Today they wish they could get more kids coming out because they have gone beyond that. So there are strategies, there are developmental paradigms, studied, peer-reviewed over what we call scholarly space that have been tried and tested. We cannot seek to do otherwise and pretend that we want to be either a socialist or we want to be left, right, or leftist, and then mix it. There must be regulation at a stage and aid growth to attain objective of development.
Some element of protectionism. But let me get your thought. I mean, the minister came back to say that they have suspended it. Do you still want this restriction on importation back at AGI? What is the level of engagement right now on that? And you want it back?
Yeah, we respectfully believe we made a case for the minister, that Mr. Minister, we are not banning the product.
Restrictions.
With some restrictions.
Yeah.
Because I keep saying, I'm an importer.
Yeah.
I can go to China and I'll get a letters of credit for 180 days to bring in rice. And I can just, a friend of mine who brings in bauxite, takes bauxite from Guinea. So he brings in an empty vessel of 200,000 metric tons. We'll say, I can bring you rice for free or bring you whatever product for free. I dump it on Ghana, he gives me a letters of credit. By that 200,000 metric tons, I've exhausted the quota. And I just push it on the market, take the Forex, and quickly repatriate. I have deprived other players of the same utilization, that's the opportunity cost, of using the same $200,000 or $2 million. So when the minister did say, it's my wish to restrict and control my Forex for the purpose of my balance of payments. And if you go into the WTO rule Article 11, whenever you have balance of payment difficulties and your Forex behaves like it did in the year 2022 August and depreciated about 30% and you lost control, it gives you the space to trigger restriction by quota, not by tariff. And by virtue of that period, government couldn't have used tariff because there've been a lot of tariff increments on all manner of fronts, and then there were significant hardships across. The only way to do that was through quota. And then through quota, you restrict and share the Forex that is available for the petroleum industry, for the chemical industry, and other related ones. So our argument to the minister then was that we know you don't intend to ban. We know you want to restrict. Nonetheless, the next question was the protocol, the process of doing that. And then the argument in the city then was that over the past years, historically, it's been the case that politicians abuse the issuance of licenses to their cronies. And I said, let history be a guide. Let it not inhibit you from doing what is right. I'm a Bible student and I'm a believer in God. The lessons of the Bible tells you that learn and pick the lessons and improve.
So I want to get from you what is the level of engagement right now as we speak? Are you still pushing the Minister of Trade to bring this policy back? Or what is the level of engagement right now?
So the level of engagement now, as going forward, and then yesterday I listened copiously to the Vice President's statement, and then in his part of his vision, he said, I seek to create jobs, and I seek to create jobs through agriculture and manufacturing. And if you seek to do that, very clear vision, well articulated with a lot of energy, you cannot seek to do that without restrictions and managing your
so you want it back
and production.
For the position of AGI, you want this policy
not
back.
for the position of Ghana.
But you speak for the AGI. That's
I do. But
do you want the policy back because you think that there should be some level of protectionism for local manufacturing?
We won't call the word. When you use the word protectionist, then the WTO rules.
Okay, for some level of support for local manufacturing firms.
Absolutely.
And therefore, it should be brought back.
Because, let me give you an example.
Should they be brought back?
One of my companies, let me give you an example. One of my companies, and pardon me, Avnash. Avnash has over a $30 million plant sitting in Savalugu. And the plant is under production. And all he can do is that he picks paddy and produces paddy and processes it into finished rice and reduce the rice basket, and therefore reduces the Forex on the importation, which goes to affect your Forex and your balance of payment. By that intervention on Forex, on Avnash, and engaging the growers, the farmers, or cooperative, you're creating jobs on the ground, you're creating production, and then the Vice President's intention of creating jobs in Savalugu, which is close to his hometown, Wale, is attainable. If you do not do that, how do you seek and allow the man who seeks to take the next job to attain that goal.
So I get from you that you want this policy back. It's
Let me give you further example.
So you want it back. That's the clarity I want to get from you.
It's good you use examples so colleagues appreciate.
So you want it
China,
back. Yeah.
Cereals, which are rice, maize, they are no-go areas. You don't toy with it with politics. Because it's a matter of survival. You got to feed your population. And whatever it takes to do that, you do. And in the US, it's the same.
So you want it back.
So we believe strongly that we got to go back to that ally and create an environment, because the challenge, and may I tell you this? So I had a meeting with, there's nothing to hide about this. I had a team of 15 members of the opposition that came to meet us in the AGI, and unfortunately I was in town, so I chaired the meeting. And they called the team made of LAB. I don't know the full name of LAB. I don't really appreciate. I don't know it. And we engaged seriously. And I did tell them, if for any reason John Mahama takes over by virtue of through the election, and he doesn't figure out how to manage and restrict importation to control the forex and his balance of payment, he will struggle. So to me, it's a national issue. There's nothing to do with here or there. To us as industry, we are business owners. We want to make profit, reasonable profit, and we want to support each government.
Let me come back to the issue about the taxes, because, and again, the vice president and the leader of the MPP made some proposals in reviewing some taxes.
Yes.
Industries, president of AGI, what do you make of these taxes? Proposals he's making.
Well, so when
VAT on electricity and all those things. What do you make of this?
So yesterday I had an invitation to be part of the members in the UPSA, and myself and a few other colleagues attended, but it was a whole jamboree, and then we appreciated it. We enjoyed. We had to just
And but he's proposing to review some taxes.
So then
what do you make of it?
So the question we ask ourselves: we have over the period expressed concern about the VAT, and we say in the case of the VAT, it has levies. The composition of the VAT structure has concern to us because it has cascading effect. The book will indicate 15%. When you add levies, which can be separated, by the time you add tax on tax, you end up paying over 21.5%.
Especially with the tax on electricity consumption, you understand.
No, even I'm tackling VAT as a zest, whether and on standards. So we did over the period, myself and the Guta and the other members of association have argued out that we need to streamline the VAT, because what we're practicing is an anomaly. It's not anywhere in the world.
Have you made this consent to GRA, to the Ministry of Finance?
No, even to the Vice President. He took the opportunity to engage a number of groups, including AGI. And we sent over 20-member delegation of big factories of all shapes. And we engaged him, and they expressed their concern. And he told Mr. Vice President, this is our concern. What do you seek to do about it? We have a lot, by virtue of that VAT computation, it makes us uncompetitive. And once it makes you uncompetitive, your other competitors who are of other jurisdiction and seeking that you are practicing a liberalized economy, import and smuggle goods through the borders. And he realized that he captured it in his speech that I'll tackle smuggling. How would he tackle it? That is what we want to find out in his manifesto. How does he seek to do the VAT computation and flat rate? Laudable idea with a lot of energy.
You want more clarity on
these
tax measures that he's announced.
The visions are all intentions. We want to go to the table with him. We shall avail ourselves and support him to perfect the document.
But again, you want more clarity on that.
Oh yes.
Let's come to now, because some are saying that it is about now.
Yes.
Let's look at the tax on emissions. And it's not just about vehicle. Industries that are into heavy production is impacting on you. Has it taken off in terms of the communication?
Seriously, for now it hasn't taken off, because the practicing note from the Ministry of Finance is not yet out. So even though the statement is out there on the factories, because you need to define a scientific way of measuring how the cement factories are doing the emission, how the chemical factories are doing the emission, for which course you could compute. In the case of the cars, they use the capacity of each car, and therefore if you go, that can easily be computed. So that of the factories have not taken off. The practicing note is not yet out, and therefore there's no cause of alarm. Members of our association and members, they're out there. We're still engaging government, and we believe that we will engage.
How is this engagement going to go? Because for some other interest groups, they are pushing for some of these taxes to be stalled. How is this engagement going to go when you engage government on this? Because someone will say that, listen, you're already burdened. These other tax measures is going to compound your situation.
That's why I use the word. The practicing notes is the blueprint that defines how this said emission will be computed and programmed onto the software to the computer for purposes of digitization.
Whichever way we'll look at it,
and once it is not ready, as long as they haven't figured it
what
out,
will be the level of engagement to ensure that this tax maybe doesn't take off?
And it's a science. It's not a matter of it being whether it's taken off. If you cannot justify it by a scientific measure, where your peers of other jurisdiction and of the same category will say your science of measuring your environmental emission within factories is standard, you cannot. If not, we take it to court and test the law. So for now, as long as we don't have the practicing notes, respectfully, Honorable Minister, we engage on all fronts with the best of heart. The practicing note is not out until...
You talked about the scientific nature of this,
of measuring of
this.
Yes.
If that is not established, is
a
legal route an option for you to consider?
Of course, because if it is not the case and you use arbitrariness, all right, and therefore if a cement factory producing presumably 50,000 metric tons a month or a day, and another producing same about 30,000, how do you measure the emission and therefore compute it? It's science. You must justify it.
Mr. President, some would say that what has been the level of engagement with the tax policy unit, with government? Because some are saying that if there were enough consultations even before these tax handles, these tax lines, all these concerns would have been addressed. Government is struggling to implement these tax measures because of these concerns. We had the ECG MD come out and say that even the structures to aid the VAT on electricity is a challenge. Now look at this one as well.
Well, I chanced with Dubik recently on a trip and we're discussing how come this 15%, and he gave me the historical antecedents of this being in the books, and then somebody chancing on it and thought that was an opportunity to rake in revenue for government, and then they just brought it up. And I said, look, on that 15%, unfortunately, the 50% is not on industry. It's on, so that moves it away from our engagement.
But that's why the emissions tax is an issue.
So on the emission tax on factories, I've told you the basis, and we don't have a practicing note, and therefore we are still engaging. Until the practicing note is defined and scientific, we can implement it. May I flip? On another front
on
of
the broader taxes.
We do engage. Let me give you another one.
Why is it that it happens?
Let me give you another one. May I? On the issue of when the sanitary pads issue came up, every year, when government is doing a midterm review or a yearly review of the budget, AGI is called on to make inputs. And we have a portal, and we send information across all members, over 2,000 members. If you are in that, and we do sectorial and we do general, and collate data and analyze the data to make a case to the minister. And we do a report. And I lead the charge to engage the minister. And I recall when we were doing that of the sanitary part. So in the heat of the debate, and then the Fourth Estate was all over the place and gave the justification why they think that was immoral and all the reasonings. The minister did tell me, that is a nightmare for me. And I told him, we once upon engage you on zero-rated VAT on the textile companies, where GTP, Printex, and the Akosobo Textiles enjoyed zero-rated VAT for import of their product. And because then there were a lot of influx of importation from the Chinese, taking our copies or copying our various products and coming through the floodgates. You recall Alan Chamanti at the stage restricted all textiles, and they had to come through Takrady Port because they wanted to control it. So as we said to the minister and with my team, Honorable Minister, we have about 3 factories then, if I could recall them, FedEx, Sunda, and one other one, that had significant capacity beyond the market demand. We proposed to the Honorable Minister, why don't you apply that which you did on the zero-rated VAT on textiles, on the sanitary parts? He looked at it, he looked at the pros and cons. When they did that of the textiles, they gained and they saw the corporate tax of the textile company increasing. They did, and that is how we engage. So respectfully, we engage.
So I get from you that the engagement for your end is working. You're pushing hard, because some are saying that with some of these problems that we experience with the implementation of these taxes for industry, it raises a lot of questions about what goes in the pre-budget engagement to ensure that these things are not hurting manufacturing firms and industries.
But we still got to be also cautious that in every society, and especially in government, there's a lot of bureaucratic stages of processing document, and therefore, where there's success, we'll tell you there's success. There are other circumstances where we engage government, and then some may be oversight. And let me give you another oversight that happened recently. So you saw there was a zero-rated VAT on the saloon cars in the auto industries.
Yeah.
So all the auto industries, by virtue of deliberate promotion of government policy for the industrialization of auto and assembling, whereas the various form of assembling, there was an oversight whereby there is a tractor company, what do you call heavy duty company, like companies that are assembling what do you call those trucks, the heavy duty trucks. Yeah. But the policy targeted only saloon cars. There was an oversight, and we told the minister, and I was in a meeting with one of the deputies. I said, these companies is into the assembling of trucks. However, the exemption of the VAT only favored saloon cars and pickups. That is clear human error. And I told the company...
But not when it comes to preparation of budget. Because
no, but you see, when it comes to preparation of budget...
Yeah.
And that's why I gave
the layers that it goes through...
But it's the duty of a company owner to also feed the association, so that when we go out to make advocacy, and the minister seeks to do an exemption on a saloon cars, and there's a an oversight of trucks. We should be, Mr. Minister, this is assembly. This is part of the auto industry. It fits into it. It's a 1D1F company. It goes through all the manner of exemption. So we believe if you extend this to the saloon cars, these companies also should benefit. When we made a case, also, that is sound. But since this is going through Parliament, we cannot do anything until the midterm review. We'll look at it. Sound case.
So has it given an assurance that during the midterm
we've submitted a letter? So the Minister of Trade called me.
These concerns will be addressed?
The Minister of Trade called me. We sent an official letter, I signed, and put one on the table of the Minister of Trade, Minister of Finance, and then we do consistent follow-up so that it's integrated. So you see, it calls for engagement. It calls for frankness and bring the data to the table and see that if this is your clear agenda as a government and you want to do auto industry, if you want to do EV cars, what are the complications? What can we support you with? Because to us as business owners, we want to win. Government also want to make its taxes. Once we could have clear engagement on the table, we shake hands, you win, we win.
You talked about EV cars, and I don't know some of your members that are into the assembling. What is the state of EV cars assembling here in Ghana?
Let me be blunt with this. So when I heard the minister, the vice president yesterday making a very bold statement about EV cars, we saw it in the 2024 budget as part of the fiscal program for 2024. When I engaged a few of friends, we were not too sure. But when you see a presidential candidate of both sides seeking to use that as a medium of reducing expenditure on government's capex and operational issues, it becomes a trigger.
Are your members in assembling of
what should happen? You will see.
I'm just asking because even in other developed economies, they are now rethinking this whole idea about EV cars. In US, as an example.
Well, that
we are struggling with power here, even stations and all the rest. The reality is that this whole argument about green and green and green. Something that African countries are not being treated well. But still coming back to my question, are they in that line of production?
Of course, because
they started some EV cars in Ghana here.
To the best of my knowledge, I know about 100 EV cars already in the system.
That have been assembled or imported?
No, they've been imported, they have chargers, and they are operating on the streets. So the next stage will be, once government gives it flexibility and drops taxes and encourages it, very soon you see other companies start importing. One of the companies have actually informed me of its intentions to bring EV cars. So, I mean, look, that is the spirit of entrepreneurship. They look for opportunities, and once the policy favors it, they take advantage of it.
Let's come back to the advocacy of the association itself.
Okay.
You think you're pushing hard for your members? Because engaging a lot of your members privately, it's a hassle. to operate in this space. And some are looking at strategies to still stay alive and still be in the industry of manufacturing.
Well, we got to be, the fact of the case is that, look, Ghana, the market of Ghana is not it's not a walk in the path because of the dimensions of policy. It always has to do with the macro. It always has to do with the forex. When your forex is distorted, your debt position of the country just goes out of shape, and then the lending rate, and there's a cascading effect. So then once the lending rate hits, and the cost of power by virtue of your import of crude and terminals are all subject to the forex, it complicates the matter. And therefore, schools of thought then thought that using the echo as a currency once upon a time will bring about stability. That didn't work. It's over the period. So the forex matter and the inflation, and it has a relationship with inflation. Once that happens, Bank of Ghana has no other choice than to deploy the monetary policy tools. Once you do same, it has a cascading effect on all the variables and indices. And then it becomes pretty hostile. And the president will seek to use moral suasion. In the era of the past president from John Kufuor, Tata Mills, JM, and President Kufuor will seek to compel the banks. But it doesn't work. It's a demand and supply matter. So tackle the subject matter from the root cause. One of them is the LI that seek to restrict and control.
Because it's going to help you and protect the environment.
It won't help.
And that is what some people think, that because it inures your favor of giving you that free room.
No, you see the subject matter.
Not to open up for competition.
Not at all. I disagree.
You are so excited about it.
No, I disagree. The subject matter when you get into this position is Ghana first. Some will want the short-term intervention. I buy, I sell, I make my money, I work out. I don't really care about it. Some will want to put in their money in the long haul because part of my dream is to leave a legacy for my kids.
What you tell those who say that your members are a contributing factor?
Like what?
Manufacturing firms are today importing and packaging.
Because the system have compelled them, because you can't balance your books. Your loan, look, today, when you take a loan of $100,000, 40% or your APR is about 42%. That is interest that you pay. Before you go into pay your cost of power, your clearing charges, how much margins do you make? So it becomes pretty hostile and difficult for the environment. And therefore, and I can tell you, I can list a number of blue chip companies. Half of their products are imported, whilst they do have capacity to produce.
It is interesting because I want some clarity from you. There are even reports that there are some big manufacturing firms that today are moving out and just going into the practice of just importing and packaging. Is that the situation on the ground?
Oh, it is possible.
It is happening.
It is possible.
Is it happening or
it is possible? Because as long as I don't control those space,
but this is not to debate on the moral.
No, it's happening. It's happening. Look, it's happening because look.
Why are they moving out?
No, they move because, and I've just described to you that the fundamentals.
Is it the lack of again being competitive and standard? That's what it is. You can't stand it.
The competitiveness is driven all the way to the macro, and until the macro is corrected, all right, it has direct impact on the micro. And in between the macro and the micro, there's a system. What is the system? There's a system of tax evasion. There's under invoicing. There's corruption. There is underhand dealing. There's all manner of system. There's intransparency in there. How do you leverage and connect the macro and the micro such that when the Bank of Ghana drops the policy rates, the banks in between will say, oh, by virtue of your systems in the middle, the micro should have an effect and drop the lending rates.
So it boils down to the macro situation.
Both macro,
it boils down
and the
to
system.
The level of taxation.
Absolutely.
It boils down to the cost of credit.
Absolutely.
And as a president of one of the biggest interest groups in this country, I believe you're not excited by this.
Well, it's a tough job. It's a very stressful job. Sometimes I tell my seniors that once upon a time thought, gentlemen, it's up to you. You've been a protege for a while. Go and take up the job and then do all the advocacy. Stop doing the boardroom engagement. It's a tough job.
But Mr. Daka, the interesting thing is that you also own several businesses.
Yeah, I do.
And how are you pushing, when it comes to the macro situation, how are you pushing those who manage this space to save these industries? Because there's an element of job creation here that we are losing. If these big multinationals are now moving out, just packaging in here, that is bad for
Let me give you one.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to call company names.
Yeah, don't, but.
And then, look, by virtue of what is happening on the grounds, when you go to the credit bureau and you see all manner of reports coming on industries and a number of SMEs operating, you see default with non-performing rate. Some are not necessary because they seek to. There are environmental issues that constrains them. There are cost of doing business. But to the intermediary, which are mostly the commercial banks, they also go out there to take funding from X or Y place, seeking a specific return on investment, and therefore they lock in and they expect to get returns on investment. And when they structure it like that, their risk managers and their corporate risk managers are programmed, and therefore that is what it is. And I chanced on a developmental institution or a developmental bank that says, I have a development fund. I want to give you X percentage, ridiculously low. And then I asked them, but the objective of your fund is to do a developmental risk setting, because you realize that there's significant potential, but the cost of borrowing and lending, it's abnormal, and it's not me saying it. All the books and all the peer reviews will tell you that Ghana is an outlier in terms of the cost of funding or cost of lending. And you seek to do a developmental fund, say 10%, and then you go out there, but you use the same yardstick of analysis of a retail bank lending at a 40% and saying, what is the objective of a developmental intervention? You must rethink your skills and staff to reorient, to be able to aid and hold companies to come out of the woods. It is a hostile market we find ourselves in. You cannot attribute it to one regime. It's been over the period because of the structural position of our economy. And the structural position of our economy over the period have been even worsened by the power purchase agreements that therefore puts your power over 10 cents per kilowatt hour, whilst your competitors in the region are doing 5 and 6, and your lending rate is excessive, and the macro and your forex rate complicates the matter.
Mr. Dake, how do we get around this challenge? And that's what I'm coming back to. Is it a lending thing? Is it the environment improvement? Because if these companies are all, these manufacturing giants are all re-strategizing, moving out, it will get to a point. We'll have an empty space in those industrial enclaves.
It becomes a pure retail outfit.
How do we move to address that challenge now? To have these companies reverse and come back and manufacture actively in this space?
One, you need a bold leader who understands, and let me repeat the question, understands the nature of economy you run, where the macro and the micro stands ajar, and the system that operates within is perfected through a particular means with sanctions and corrections to make sure that the effect of the macro, when the Bank of Ghana says I'm dropping policy rates by 150%, there must be that system that can receive it and it will have an effect on the micro and drop the pricing. So that when there's an oligopolistic market, a farmer in Wale Wale produces rice or tomato, and then there's a market queen in the middle with the transport owner. When they collude, it's oligopolistic market. Before it gets to the final consumer, that set of price can escalate and distort your price and trigger your inflationary rates. So if you cannot control the system through whatever means with an understanding of this market, you can't get effects. A pretty complicated one. So therefore, we're looking out for the two major party leaders, to demonstrate. And I've told you, the AGI has been engaging. We have what we call a strategic section coming with our council. We want to engage the two parties to make a case, and we'll share with them our heart and tell them what we believe they should do in their manifesto. And when I listened to the speech of the Vice President yesterday, and in part of our discussions, we said, yes, brilliant discussion. Nonetheless, what are the hows? Where demonstrate to us the hows to attain the macro stability.
So that whilst we blame the external environment for this challenge, This didn't happen in just a year, 2 years, 3 years. Over a period. What are your industries themselves also doing, apart from the externalities, the macro situation, to ensure that, listen, things doesn't get out of hand? Because it appears that every day things are deteriorating for the manufacturing firms, to the extent that they are now moving out, they are now cutting manufacturing just into packaging and all the rest.
Let me give you another statistic. Look out for the latest ISE, Institute of Statistical and Service report on the expenditure of education and social welfare to GDP. Yeah. To tell you that it spent about 28% of GDP on education and welfare. When you drill down further and to see how much percentage of GDP was spent on agriculture and manufacturing, it's under 5%. And the world standard indicates for you to have consistency in growth that you can find in China, you can find in the West, you must spend not less than at least 20% of your GDP in capex, investing in agriculture and in manufacturing to complement all the skills that are coming out of university. And this is not my data, this is the data of the Ghana Statistical Services. And if you find it, and it's a backset, if you do not spend on research and development significantly to input into those innovations and the new dynamics of the world, the AI and everything, you cannot absorb the number of unemployment that is coming up. And therefore it has cascading effect on the general economy, and therefore manufacturing is weak. So we believe that the capex from the GDP that is being spent on agriculture because it's one of the easy way and one of the arable places we could go. 2, manufacturing then complements agriculture. Thirdly, our extractive industries is underutilized. Most of the contractual agreements hanging in there are not perfect. We could improve on it. So when we tackle this space, because significantly in the service industry and in the current regime, a lot of interventions have come into the social welfare, in the education space, in the digitization space, improving that space. And even when the financial failure came in the financial industry, over $25 billion Ghana cedis was intervened. When you go further, you can still explore when there were other failures in the market failure, there were significant interventions. But when it's happening in agriculture and in manufacturing, there's no intervention. But that is where the real economy is.
Mr. Daki, I'll be coming back to look at the financing issue, the policy rate concerns, and also the fact that the IMF has said that, listen, they are seeing signs of recovery.
Yes.
And how is that impacting on your operations?
Great.
The purchasing power issue. This is PM Express Business. I should look at the Association of Ghana Industries. Pick their thoughts on the current state of industries and whether the expected or the signs of recovery is impacting on the operation. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition, as we look at the state of the industries in Ghana today and how is the expected economic recovery impacting on the operations. I'm engaging Dr. Humphrey Yimdake. He's the president of the Association of Ghana Industries, getting his thoughts on a lot of interesting things that are happening right now in the economy and what is the way forward. Your barometer that you publish always has always raised concerns about the cost of funding for your members and all the rest.
Yes.
In all the challenges that are going on right now, funding, cost of credit, is it a problem, and how do we get around it?
Well, yes, cost of funding is still a problem. There's always a causation factor to the cost of funding. And the bankers will tell you, I recall once upon a time in the era of my predecessor, Tony Atinjesi, we conducted a research and aided the Bank of Ghana to develop a formula for computing this cost of lending to the commercial banks. And the various indices that came up, including non-performing loans and other related ones as the T-bill rates. There are a number of measurements that they put in together into the basket. And then for one of the strong advocacy then was that the non-performing loans was as a result of inability to trace borrowers. And that was part of the reason that ignited the ID system and the digitization system so that we could identify the borrowers and therefore we could trace them and their guarantors and reduce the state of the non-performing loans. Now, but beyond that, there are other causation factors, and I keep going back to the extent of the unbridled position of your forex and your over-liberalized market. There are schools of thought. There are the fanatics that are of the opinion that, just liberalize everything. Let the forces of demand and supply determine the market. But there are other jurisdictions of our similar characteristics who do not believe in same. And you could see significant growth because there are elements of regulation. And I can tell you, even in the European countries, sanitary measures, non-tariff measures, even today, in our neighboring countries, by virtue of the conflict in Burkina, Mali, and what's the other one? My team told me, Niger. Yeah. There's a restriction of trade.
How is that impacting on some of your members?
It is because by
how bad is the situation for your members?
Well, as bad, we've got to do further research to see.
Yeah, but in terms of bringing in raw material and exporting to that country because the landlord.
Let me give you an example. You remember the example of the onions?
Yeah.
Remember the onions one?
Yeah, I do.
How it triggered and the statistician reported how onion within the basket of inflation was high by virtue of the intra-trade. So now that even there's conflict within that zone, it has effects on tomato, grains, movement of product, plastics in and out. There are complications.
And that is affecting your members.
Of course it is because it's
and now there's even a threat to even get out of the ECOWAS.
That but then worsens it. Then when it worsens it, your ETLS, the ECOWAS transactional that gives you the protocols to import product across board and also the labor within 30 to 90 days will all be abused and to bring further complications onto the ECOWAS economic zone trade market.
So whichever way you look at this, it is bad for Ghanaian industry. It is not a good thing for Ghanaian
there are only
Some Ghanaian industries will struggle if this thing goes ahead.
The challenges always, the tough will always outlast the challenges. So it's a matter of time then, it becomes a duty of the entrepreneur to rethink and remodel his business. So that if Mali, Niger is conflict, can you try Togo and Benin, or can you focus your import into another jurisdiction? So it becomes an ability to be dexterity.
I bring this financing issue because there are some of the school of thought that there should be some special funding for industries.
Absolutely.
There are some also saying that, listen, look at the high NPLs and look at where it's coming from.
Yes.
Some of your members can't meet the obligation. I recall, the problem is not necessarily the
strongly.
Cost of credit.
I disagree strongly.
How do we get around this then? Should there be a special banking, a special financing arrangement where deliberately we lend to X sector to support them?
George, I've been in this space over a couple of decades. And I recall when the bureaus were set up. And then when the banking reforms happened, we saw a lot of third-party lending within same parent companies. And they were not performing, they were all adding up to the MPLs. And then the cliche then was that the SMEs were not performing because they form 80 to 90% of the economy. Look, there are causation factors that has to do with competition. We don't have anti-competition laws. There are open markets, liberalized under invoicing, and I described the entire system to you that complicates this Ghanaian economy. So for us going forward, we of industry believe if it happened that there was a market failure in the financial sector and government bailed them with 25 billion, if there was a market failure also in other sectors and government bailed them out, to agriculture and manufacturing, which is the main productive sector of the economy, but for extractive industry, must also have a fund deliberately hand-holding to make a few giants. Dangote was made.
So you need a support
Samsung
fund.
Was made.
Support fund
GM
for industries.
Was made. We do need it. Why shouldn't we? For purposes for agriculture. And I keep saying, and I tell the minister anytime I meet him, the GSS has demonstrated that your inflationary basket is triggered by the food basket. What is the food security of our country? What is the framework? When you put in 1 grain of rice or maize to eat, you will need maybe 5 kilos of meat. For the 5 kilos of meat, which is chicken, you might need 5 of the grains to produce the chicken because you got to feed it. And therefore, for you to eat kenke and meat, the meat needs more 5 grains for this. There must be a clear food, security structure from the farm gate distributing through logistics, storage, and we call it what we all did in accounting, FIFO, LIFO, first in, first out, and you structure it and manage the entire economy on the food basket.
Is the cost of sourcing some of your ingredients locally a challenge? Because some of your members are just importing again the raw material for manufacturing and working.
Because you must deliberately grow the agriculture sector. And I told you that what is the capex of your GDP or your capital expenditure of your GDP that goes into agriculture and manufacturing? Go check it out. It's under 5%. And however, when is the leader who says, so I want to push education, he puts in about 28%.
Fantastic. I ask this question because of the argument about cost, but there are several farmers out there who complain that what your members are importing, they have it abundance locally.
You see,
we are complaining about the city being under pressure. You look at K1, the Bank of Ghana will tell you that manufacturing sector, energy sector, that is what is driving the FX demand for K1. If you can source these things locally,
so if you can
why are
source
you bringing them from outside? Because it's cheaper.
So in sourcing locally,
and industries turn around and complain about the city's depreciation.
So in sourcing locally, so I'm going to produce maize.
Yeah.
When I'm producing maize, I'm importing fertilizer. I'm importing pesticides. I'm importing other products to make that product come up. And if the yield on my soil by scientific is 2 tons per square meter, whilst there is improved seed elsewhere giving me 9 tons, how then can you be competitive to a factory like Avnash who wants to process? So you see, it is an integrated system. You take from the farm gate, the various input, the value chain, you deliberately make interventions for the food basket, which drives the inflationary rate. You give it a control measure, and you support your farmers deliberately and connect it to industry. And once that is lowered, that is the first phase, is food shelter. Once you get a food and shelter, other precisions and advanced technology that will send it to the IT world and AIs are the next stage. But basically, your food and shelter and clothing, you must fix it. If you need to give some form of regulatory measures through regulatory agencies and control and bring limitations, like the minister seeks to do for grains, for Yemadia. What is Yemadia? For
you really
water.
Want this and barley be implemented?
If you do not do that, you cannot create the jobs. How are you going to create the jobs? You
By
can create
doing
jobs from agriculture.
On
You see, you do the restriction and you deliberately assist a few that you can pick. And you see, when it gets to that stage, what was done, if you read the South Asian miracles of Korea and go to Malaysia, Singapore, they handpicked, supported them, made them big. And then the subcontracting brings others on. And over 10 years, you can name 10, 20 companies. And their value chain will become part of the system of creating wealth.
The IMF says that they are seeing signs of recovery.
That's correct.
According to the IMF.
Yes.
How is that impacting on your operations in terms of purchasing power and all those things? What is the situation on the ground?
Well, you see, so
the macro level, which you've complained about, the IMF now claims that they are seeing signs of recovery. Is that impacting on industry? Or it is yet to trickle down?
No, but it's true. I mean, when the IMF comes in, one will say when you go to the OPD or you go to the emergency ward, they figure out to give you a bit of pills and in our local parlance, iodine to soften the soil and cool it down. So what they seek to do immediately is to aid you stabilize your balance of payments. But beyond the IMF, you find the World Bank who has committed to some infrastructure development. Where is the infrastructure development? That might be roads and infrastructure. But then you ask yourself, where is the real sector for structural reforms, agriculture and manufacturing? Are they putting direct funding in there? They will rather seek to give you technical support. And I once upon a time spoke to Alan Chamantin and I said, the IPA, Interim Partnership Agreement you sign with the UK or sign with the other jurisdiction, and I'm being very blunt on that, part of their consultation fees that they brought in came to train 40 companies. And they will say by virtue of training 40 companies, they are competent enough to sign the EPAs. But you ask yourself, is this 40 companies aggregate demand or supply significant to impact your GDP? No. So you must go in there with full understanding of the situation and then realize that, look, some interventions will not change the status quo. So when you get some interventions coming in for training, consultant fees, and most of the consultant fees coming from the donor partners, half goes back to their own consultants. We need direct intervention fund in CAPEX, buying machineries. Our land reform system must change. We need special economic zones that can absorb number of SMEs, startups, and support them with some direct interventions to grow. And then their aggregate impact will affect your GDP.
Because I asked that the real signs of recovery is the state and the health of industries and what is happening. That's why I'm asking that.
Thank you.
If they claim that this is the situation, is our industry feeling this?
Because currently,
the purchasing power improving? Because there are someone saying that, listen, people are still not buying.
Temporarily, the intervention that you see by virtue of a BOP is the stability in the forex. So when the forex is stable, and then they make sure that they put in rules that the Bank of Ghana will not do further quantitative easing to trigger inflationary rates by financing the deficit of government, and therefore the inflationary rate drops. That is not significant to translate to structural transformation in the agricultural space. It's not significant. For now, you will feel it because of the forex. Reasonable stability in the forex over the period. And therefore, you wouldn't see Guta complaining that because they've tackled the forex. Yeah. But you should then ask yourself, is that intervention sustainable into after 3 years? Because we have a 3-year program with them. After 3 years, presumably a government and a president comes in and says, look, I want to be very bold and take further decisions. Then you ask yourself, have you used a 2 or 3 year period to stimulate the productive sector for purposes of export, to bring you revenue to balance your BOP?
Let's come to the demand for your products and services, or manufacturing stuff and all the rest. Has the situation improved, or is it still a challenge?
Reasonably, I think for the purpose of the forex, we all see some forex stability, and therefore we have been predicting for the last 6 months. I can reasonably say between now and the half of the year, exchange rate will play within some space. Between the third and fourth quarter, by virtue of election, that can be another different story.
I'm looking at the purchasing power of your consumers.
Yes.
And what has happened over the period has deteriorated the purchasing power of consumers.
So
as we speak now, in this subtle stability, have we seen an improvement in demand from consumers, or it is still a major challenge?
Whilst coming here, I called my policy director and I asked him, what is the state of consumption? What is the impact? And he went to the GSS. So I'll give you reference. Ghana Statistical Services.
But the GSS is what your members are telling you, that when we produce, people are buying.
No, so
that could be the macro, but trickle it down to your members. How are things doing?
To the best of my ability, GSS gathers data and then the data across. And the GSS data indicated that VAT, in terms of VAT collection and consumption, has increased by 30%. That is significant to tell you that, yes, there's consumption going on.
But what are your members telling you in terms of consumption?
Of course, reasonably, there's a trend in growth. But whilst that trend in growth exists, there are other concerns we look out for. And I give you an example. When the second tranche of the IMF delayed, and we're all wondering, and in our speech, I remember I did a speech for AGI in a council meeting, we raised concern, how soon is this going to come in? It dragged for a while. Once it happens like that, your suppliers are careful. Because most of the big factories playing now will use suppliers credit. Okay, and they'll have suppliers from external sources sending their funding, and they know the data. So when they see the uncertainties, they either hold back, they don't supply you quickly, and it can affect your output in terms of your throughput time, your stock level, and it can affect your market share. So there are dynamics to it. So I believe, by virtue of the IMF intervention, kudos to government, we are grateful. It was a tough negotiation. They've done that aspect of it. It's growing. They should keep focus on the program, the post-COVID-19
PCPEC.
They should stay focused. We know the challenge will be in the fourth quarter because of the election. Nonetheless, if they keep within the parameters, we believe businesses will have stability and predict.
So I get from you that in terms of the purchasing power,
Yes.
things are improving,
It's improving
slightly.
Yes, it's improving.
Let's come to your cost input, and again, I bring the inflation argument here again.
Yeah.
There have been some of the school of thought that if the rate at which your inputs, the purchasing price at the farm gates was increasing is slowing down, that should impact on your cost of operations.
Now, of course,
Will you also then pass it on to your consumers? If inflation, the rate at which the price of increase is slowing down, that would impact on your cost of operations.
I mean, those are. I did not tell you this because once your cost of operation, which technically is your cost of doing business, or cost of producing a unit of a particular product increases by virtue of, until recently, that the 15% was reversed on the electricity. That could have had an impact. All right.
But that's for domestic consumption.
Oh, but if it's domestic consumption, it reduces the purchasing power of the individual. And if it does reduce the purchasing power of the individual, what happens to your product? Then the issue of what you call the issue of opportunity cost. Either I got to buy kenke or I buy gari. Then it diverts the attention. So there are dynamics in there. And I think for government, let's say to government, negotiating this us out of this particular situation. It's a phenomenon. Look, I don't cry over spilled milk. I mean, events have passed. How do we look forward? What is the vision? How do we perfect and then re-streamline, restructure, and give ourselves space? And then use that space and the transition period to invest into productive sectors. So by the time the call comes for you to pay back your debt and your principals, that investment in those productive places will trigger some revenue to aid you cushion.
I asked this question that's to get the understanding from you that if your cost of input goes down, will you pass on that benefit to your consumers by reducing prices?
If you don't do that, competition will take you out. Because if my cost of doing business drops and I seek to keep it, and my other competitor has a bigger scale of production, drops it. Let me give you an example. So if I produce special ice and Casaproco also produces water, they both are in the same market. I'm doing 5,000 and he's also doing 1,000. And the same cost of production in water or power drops, and one refuses to drop it, and the man doing the volumes, he'll knock him out of it and take his market share. So it is of your own interest to keep your market share, to manage your prices.
Some of these, you talked about the trade agreements, and we've had even UK, for instance, or EU, for instance, introduce some new rules that could impact on exports into that country as well. How are your members shaping up for this? That could come with some extra cost in exporting to these markets.
So it's unfortunately sometimes we behave as ostriches. There are geopolitical, there are territorial space to protect, even though we all embrace the subject matter of globalization. Every individual knows that somebody brought him into power, his citizens brought him into power. And therefore, even though the WTO rule stands, they will go and look for administrative strategies to frustrate some of your export into their market. But however, they will create an export route. And I keep giving clear examples to people. There are some jurisdictions. When you go elsewhere, you find communities that are labeled to a particular jurisdiction. Name it. You can give country names. Oh, this is this city, this is this city. And the people there are of the origin of that particular country. And then once they are of that country, they enjoy the food, the culture, the clothing. And as they export it to them, it's a form of export. Then they have strategies for export. They have state export, they have municipal export, and individual export. And as they do that, they use that deliberately to balance their balance of payment. There are strategies of export and trade strategies. Globalization, I'll leave it there.
And the problem I get you is how the system has not been fair. But the reality is that the EU and these countries are going to roll out these measures.
And that
would impact on your cost of exporting to these countries.
Absolutely.
What is the way around it?
Well, and what's the way around it? It's policy. It's your think tank. It's your leadership that sits and take every sector and look at the value chain and say, if I take cashew or if I take shea butter, do I export cashew or shea butter in its raw state? What is the value process if I add value to it? How much money would I make? And then you scan the environment and see that if I export it to this country, they have manufacturing outlet, they need this. How do I negotiate in your trade policy relationships to make sure that if it is cocoa, a combination of cocoa between Ivory Coast and Ghana, how do we make sure we take the market and process and make sure we take bigger chunk of the market, either through processing or semi-processing? It is policy, it is leadership, it is engagement, and it is strategy. The trade aspect of this world will tell you trade is not a child's game. You must strategize. And if you go to Brussels, they have units on every sector engaging and deliberating. AFTA must go beyond that and pick sectorial issues and cross-cutting and between countries, inter-country relationships, like Cocoa, Ivory Coast and Ghana, and develop a strategy in the value chain and support us through AFDB deliberately to add value before we export.
From the perspective of AGI, how is one district, one factory doing?
All right, so you see, one district, one factory.
From the perspective of AGI?
Lovely and a brilliant concept. However, it cannot be a standalone concept. And I recall I had a couple of friends that went into the cassava industry seeking to process cassava for ethanol and flour. So when you seek to do that, you import the machineries when you want to, you take the advantage of the various policies. But you should know that beyond that, you should be sure that you have an off-taker agreement that gives you guaranteed for the product, either ethanol or cassava flour or any other byproduct. Then you do a backward integration to look at the farm tenure system. As you get the farmers, for purpose of security, you must also do part of the farming. If your capacity is 10,000, presumably do 2,000 to control the pricing from the farmers. Do cooperative. You could choose to even be a bit magnanimous and give them shares in their business to guarantee security. When you move on from there, you look at the seedlings that can give you the best of yield of the cassava that goes into your plant. So if you do 1D, 1F as a standalone, without integrating the value chain, you'll be shortchanged.
And that is what is happening.
And I think that to some extent, laudable idea between the PFJ1 connecting to the 1D, 1F, and then there were we needed some interventions in terms of capital equipment to equip the structures and open structures that were established. There were bricks, and in between those value chain, different ministry, interministerial engagement. We couldn't get a connection, policy coordination. Remember, we came to argue strongly about there was a policy, what was the policy called? Gutta and I argue about a policy called...
The imports, it has to do with the levy on the
on importation. So,
you
see, so you look at holistic, integrated life. So other jurisdictions will not do it for every product. They will look for their primary product. So if it's cassava, cocoa, gari, and then you focus on it. Integrate the line. And that is why I love the bauxite project that the president seeks to do. The only challenge now is that we need to get a refinery and get a rail line. Once you get that, the value chain of the bauxite from Awaso down to Aluwex, down to Vaco, will transform.
With all these things not being in place,
yes,
would you then describe it as a failure?
No, but I mean, hey, growth is a process and development is a process.
Because some would say that with all these challenges that have bedeviled a lot of industries.
No, but you see, you don't call it a failure because
it hadn't lived up to expectations.
No, because you see, that's why I use the word. It's a process because it takes a dreamer, it takes
4
a leader.
years, 8 years.
Well, so you then...
Was it necessary to have each district having a manufacturing firms? You talked about an off-taker agreement and all those things. They were not in place. Even if it's on the paper, they were not enforced.
No, you contextualize it in the era when the proponent of the ideology came up. How did they shape it when they got into government? And sometimes you should realize, when you're out, your ideas could be very fantastic. When you get in there, you see the tones and the constraints.
It wasn't well thought through.
I won't say that. I may say that they could have perfected and probably reduce a number of, and give it some priorities in terms of product that they believe can make significant impact. And that's why I give it a box.
But the end justifies the means.
But the end result of government
this
is a
policy
continuous.
today,
no, a government.
there is no
let's give an
guarantee
example.
that any new government that comes to implement this.
Yeah, but there's no
end result
guarantee
today
that there's no guarantee that
spreading industries all over
yes
wasn't a prudent
but
decision.
no. But you should realize that the spreading of industry all over was private sector led. Government didn't say I'm spreading all industry. It says I'll bring you omnibus interventions that will help anybody who goes into the private sector.
Without equipping the private sector?
No.
So so industries there were complaining
did.
about access to funding,
fantastic
power issues and all the rest.
So then it becomes the
So
you should watch. They should realize that when government proposed that, they sought to put a lot of responsibility on you, the entrepreneur. So you got to identify where there's power, identify where there's raw materials, put your books together such that you can get attraction from the banks. Nonetheless, in the course of the banks coming in, we had complicated financial reforms, which was not thought through in the era of the 1D1F.
Yeah.
So now in the middle
we come
of the
back
water,
to the argument about thought through at this point.
whoever knew that the financial reforms there were that devastating to the tune of $25 billion. 25 billion Ghana cedis. Nobody knew that then. So you get in the middle of the water, you see the difficulty. So what you might do, maybe I may say prune down. Okay, let's focus on 3 areas and let's see whether we can get deliberate intervention.
Mr. Dake, as we try and wrap up, let's look at the outlook for this sector. That for you, what can be done now to improve the fortunes of manufacturing firms, industries going forward, and then the outlook for the sector?
Seriously, I believe that going forward, between agriculture and manufacturing, the current government's era is just running out. But they have a program that when I studied the document, I thought was a good program called the Enclave Project, which is under the Obatampa Care Project, where they sought to pick a few companies and do commercial farming. I have studied almost of the interventions that is gone into the agric space, running through the Ministry of Agric, scattering the intervention on peasant farmers all over. But you realize that the aggregate impact of the peasant farmers cannot change the GDP and the import basket. Elsewhere, they target huge commercial farmers. I was surprised when I went to China recently, and one of the big firms in power had an allied or subsidiary in agriculture. And I asked them why. They say, by virtue of the organizational structure of the parent company with the corporate governance, we believe that with that expertise, we can translate it to agriculture. And every state-owned enterprise in China has an element of agriculture. So the aggregate impact in terms of commercial farming makes significant impact. Don't discount supporting the peasant farmers, but deliberately pick a few commercial-oriented farmers that have capacity. Support them, whichever form it is. Negotiate it. And let their aggregate impact affect the import basket of rice, maize, tomato, anything that affects your BOP, and you have the area land tackle that. When you do that, the next stage is that you deliberately make interventions into manufacturing companies that can complement those 5 or 6 products that you've picked that will affect your import basket and therefore will reverse and aid your structural transformation.
Dr. Humphrey Dake is the President of the Association of Ghana Industries. And the debate will still go on in your offices, in your homes, about what best can be done to support industries to take their rightful place in this economy. My name is George Affe. This has been PM Express Business Edition. Have a great day.